Hey guys, it's Allie. Welcome back to Infertile AF, the podcast. This is episode 165 called Emma. Today's episode is presented by Belle. Belle offers modern prenatal vitamins optimized for fertility, prenatal, and post-pregnancy health. To learn more about how to optimize your fertility and pregnancy health, check out their vegan-friendly, dairy-free, non-GMO vitamins for both men and women at bellybaby.com. That's spelled BELIBABY.com. The best part, if you use code ALLIE15, you'll get 15% off your first month of either Belle Women or Belle Men. Again, that's code ALLIE15, ALI15, for 15% off. Thanks, Belle. Before we get started, guys, I wanted to tell you that the countdown is on for our 4th Fertility Rally Live event, which is happening this Saturday, April 23rd from 1 to 6 p.m. Eastern Time. So you don't have to come live. Even if you have a ticket, you have 30 days to watch all of our talks and all of our speakers. And you also get our virtual swag bag. But we would love it if you did come live this Saturday because we've got all these things. We've got a keynote talk with Dr. Ruhi Jalani, who is a fertility doctor as well as a fertility patient at Kind Body Bios. She has an incredible fertility story of her own. We have a panel called The Happy Ending We Never Expected, with guests speaking about embryo donation, surrogacy, sperm donation, and a surprise pregnancy. It's an amazing panel of badass women, moderated by Candace Wohl. And then we have 10 breakout sessions. So we've got egg and sperm quality, we've got infertility and exercise, we have one all about sex and intimacy, advanced testing and IVF add-ons, and so much more. So please join us. We have a happy hour at the end of the day. We have crazy giveaways all day. There's a really fun interactive chat. And we basically just want everyone to walk away feeling inspired, educated, and supported by our Worst Club with the best members. So check us out at Fertility Rally on Instagram. You can see the link in our bio to get tickets, or you can go to my Infertile AF Stories Instagram and link in bio there, or in my stories. I'm going to be talking about it the rest of the week. So we hope to see you at Fertility Rally Live. Let me know if you have any questions. All right, guys. So let me tell you about my guest today, Emma K. Belle. Emma is a life coach and a mentor who focuses on mental health recovery, trauma recovery, and emotional awareness learning. And she's also a huge advocate for the infertility community, and she is an infertility warrior herself. She heads up a bipolar disorder recovery online support group, and she also created TFMR Mamas, which is a group for those who have lost their babies to termination for medical reasons. So today, Emma is going to tell us all about her own story, and it has a lot going on. So she's going to tell us about her, what she calls her very chaotic and hectic young life, being in a domestic violence relationship, living with bipolar, and what happened when she went in to freeze her eggs, what she found out when she was 35. She's also going to take us up to where she is now. She's going to tell us about the devastating loss of her baby Willow and why she formed TFMR Mamas. And she is just incredible. So this is an amazing story. I want you guys to also stay to the very end, because since we did this interview a handful of weeks ago, something great has happened. So her story has taken a turn, and I'm going to tell you at the end where she is now. She wrote me a little update, and I'm going to read it at the very end of our interview. So definitely stick around for that. I want to thank Emma so much. Definitely check out her TFMR Mamas group if that is something that applies to you. And if it is, I'm so sorry that you have gone through or are going through that. And without further ado, this is Emma's infertility story. All right. Hello, Emma. How are you today?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Good. You are calling from Dubai, so from the future, basically. I think it's from 9:30 in the morning for me, and you said 6:30 for you, right?
6:30 here. So yeah, I'm in the desert.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. Well, let's get right into your story. Tell me about you growing up. Did you always want to be a mom?
I don't know, really, is the answer to that. I think I grew up my childhood was difficult, and I left home at 15. So my life very quickly became about surviving and earning enough money to eat and just surviving. So, and life was very chaotic, and I had, I was sexually assaulted by my uncle, and then unfortunately ended up in really unsafe circles, and was raped at the age of 19. So my young life was very chaotic and very hectic. So I wouldn't say that was really on my radar, because I had too much else to think about, I think.
Right. Understandable. Yeah.
And then the sort of family upbringing I hadn't really had any positive male role models. So I was then very adamant that I would only have a family when it was right, with the right person, where I could have a family environment that I felt honestly would be nothing like mine growing up. So for me, I wasn't in a rush, because I didn't want to rush with the wrong person. So anyway, I was with someone for, after my life was very chaotic, and then it kind of started coming back on the rails in my early 20s. But from 15 to 21, it was very difficult, and I was in a domestic violence relationship, and it was just a very stressful time.
So sorry to hear all that.
Oh, it's just, what it's like when your life goes off the rails, it then goes even further and further and further off the rails, until eventually you kind of come back to some kind of, well, for me anyway, some kind of normality. But that took a lot of time. But so then in my early 20s, I then got with somebody, and then I went traveling around the world, split up with that guy that was just awful, and got in a long-term relationship. I was with someone for 7 years, but then we arrived at the conclusion, all of our friends were getting married and having kids, and we kind of arrived at the conclusion that we didn't actually want to marry each other and we didn't want to have kids together. So we went our separate ways. We're still friends now, and he's friends with my now husband. But yeah, it just wasn't a lifetime relationship. And then I got married. I've been married twice. I am married now, but I was married before. So this is my second marriage.
Okay.
And I got married, and we were married for 4 years. But sadly, he had quite a lot of things going on that meant that our lives weren't compatible together anymore. So I walked away from that marriage, because I suppose underlying, I've always had this desire to be with the right person. Love doesn't solve everything, basically.
Right.
Sadly, love doesn't always solve everything, right?
Wouldn't it be nice if that was the answer? Yeah.
Wouldn't it be? But it's not, right?
Right.
Often not.
Right.
So we went our separate ways. And then about a year or two later, I met Gareth, who I'm with now. And we've been together 9 years, and we're married.
Okay. And how did you guys meet?
We met in our hometown in Brighton, just out one evening having drinks. And to be honest, I was just not in the headspace for meeting anybody. And it was summer, and I thought it would be nice, summer, we'll go to some festivals and have a nice time. And then I thought that he'd be in my life a little bit, and we'd go to some festivals and have some fun. But actually we ended up just staying together.
Okay. So what was different about Gareth? How did you know that he was the one you wanted to be with?
I really don't know. It just sort of evolved. He got a job in Switzerland. So we did a long distance relationship between England and Switzerland for a year. Then I moved to Switzerland, and we lived there for 4 years. And then my job brought me to Dubai. So I had to do long distance between Switzerland and Dubai for a year. And then I said, right, that's it. It's your time to move for me now. So he moved to Dubai with me. We've been here 3 years. It's just one of those things, it's happened. And here we are.
Okay. So at what point did you guys start talking about building a family?
So I had the Mirena coil in and out for 19 years.
Okay.
18, 19 years. Not the same one, obviously, different ones. But so because I always thought that periods and bleeds were completely inconvenient. I thought that the women's cycle was completely inconvenient to life. This is the mindset I used to have.
So does the coil stop that? I don't know much about that.
Yeah, the Mirena coil stops you bleeding.
Oh, okay. Did not know that.
Yeah, not the copper one. The copper one tends to make people bleed heavier, I think, often. But I've never had one. That's just what my friends say. But yeah, the Mirena coil. So I'd pop it in, you'd spot bleed for 6 months, and then you'd get 4 to 4.5 years of no bleeding.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. So I did this for 18 years. And when it ran out, I went in, had a new one put in. And then we decided in August 2019 that I would have my coil taken out. But I had already been in Switzerland when I was 35. I went to go and get my eggs frozen because I thought, well, I'm 35. We're not quite ready to have kids yet. So maybe I'll go and get some eggs frozen, thinking I'd hop in, get some eggs frozen, Bob's your uncle, hop out.
Bob's your uncle.
Yeah. You know, but
I'm gonna guess from the tone of your voice, that's not what happened, Emma.
That's not what happened. No, that was the beginning of me finding out I had fertility problems. So it was a bit of a shock.
So what happened? What did they tell you?
Well, I went in and I said, I'd like to freeze some eggs, please. And they were like, right, okay, we need to do some tests first. So I didn't even know what they were testing. And then they came back and said, actually, you've got diminished ovarian reserve. And normally women would have 5 to 10 antral follicles per ovary. And you've got a total of 5 between the two. And I was like, oh, didn't know what it meant.
How old were you at the time, Emma?
35.
35. Okay.
So then I said, well, okay, we'll just freeze some eggs. And they said, but it's probably going to take 3 rounds to get 10 eggs, which is what you really want to bank if you're freezing your eggs, to have a chance of doing a whole round when you're ready to at least get, 1 or 2 embryos. I didn't really know what they were talking. It was like they were talking to me in Chinese. So I'm kind of like nodding. Yeah, right, okay.
Sure.
Nodding.
Did you have any friends who'd frozen their eggs or gone through this before?
No. And because I wasn't in a space where I was trying for a family, fertility and infertility really wasn't on my radar. So I was just viewing this as a process. In Switzerland, it was $10,000 per round to freeze. Just eggs.
To freeze. Wow.
So it would have cost me $30,000. Well, I didn't have a spare $30,000 then lying around to have a chance of freezing 10 eggs.
Right.
I don't have spare 30,000 lying around now, but you know what I mean?
You don't have like a suitcase full of cash next to your nightstand. Okay.
So I just thought, without really understanding the enormity of what he was saying, because it was also being done in different language. So we had a language barrier going on because he was speaking in French, parts of Switzerland are German, parts of French. So he was speaking to me in broken French, broken English. I was speaking to him in broken French and broken English, trying to understand. So I don't think the severity of it was really conveyed to me. But then, so I just said, oh, do you know what? I'll wait till we're ready and what happens, happens. And that's it, skipped off out the door again. Felt a bit sort of surprised and felt a bit sort of sad to learn that I would, need some help. Because his exact words were, when you go to get pregnant, you're going to need some help. So I sort of hopped out, didn't really know what to think of that, and then carried on for another few years. But what that did give me is I always had it in the back of my mind that when I'm ready, I basically just need to go to a fertility clinic straight away, have my tests done again, see what my levels are, and then see what the plan of action is.
Sure. Did you feel worried at all at this point? Like, were you nervous about things not working out in the future, or was it just kind of Bob's your uncle?
No, because it was a bit disappointing to hear that I would need help and I wouldn't be able to do it in the way that I thought. But because I wasn't in a space where I've been trying, I don't think it landed on me in the same way that it would if I had been trying for a couple of years and then I got told that, for example.
Right.
That would have hit very different.
Right.
So in some ways I'm grateful for when I found out, because it didn't hit me as hard as it would have done if I'd spent however long trying naturally and then had that information given to me. So I kind of felt a bit empowered, like, okay, well, I know that I've got to go and take action straight away. So took my coil out in August 2019, went straight to a fertility clinic. My levels were lower than they were before. Antral follicle count was still similar. But then she said, you've got to do a 3-month, 12-week kind of prep, like to get you ready. So put us on some prenatals and all of this. And we got ready to do a first ovulation induction in January 2020, which is what we did. And it was a fully medicated. So I did Clomid, and then I did, all the gonal F, and then the trigger shot.
Okay. How did you do on the drugs?
Clomid was very difficult for me.
Uh-huh. In what way?
Well, I live with bipolar.
Okay. Yeah.
So Clomid for me was disastrous on my mental health. Honestly. Yeah. I later found out I was better on Femera.
Okay.
But Clomid for me is a disaster, as is Difeston.
Yeah. Can we talk about the bipolar? You don't have to if you don't want to, but
yeah, sure.
When did you get diagnosed with that?
When I was 30.
Okay.
So,
and what does that look like for you? I know it's different with everybody, but how does it look like in your case?
Well, now I'm very lucky that I live a mostly stable life. But I've had a decade to get to know it and to get to and to learn to respect the condition that I live with, so that I can change my life to give me the best chance of having the most stable life. I couldn't have carried on as I was, because I would have carried on getting really unwell.
Okay. In
a cyclical fashion, because the life that I was leading was very triggering to my mental health condition and kept leading me to being very unwell. But because I wasn't diagnosed, I didn't know what I needed to do, because I didn't know if there was a problem. I just thought it was me.
Okay.
But at my most unwell, I tried to take my own life. I tried to crash the car. I've done lots of things. And I've also been completely manic and been completely paranoid, thought people were coming to spy on me in my own home, thought spies were being sent to me. So that was just before I got diagnosed. So yeah, at my most poorly, it's very poorly and scary.
Yes.
But that was a lot largely because I didn't know that I had anything to manage.
Right. So when you finally got the diagnosis, was it a little bit of a relief, at least, that you were able to name, they were like, this is why this is happening and here's what we can do to help you?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I spent the first 2 or 3 years on antipsychotics, which was awful because I was only awake for about 8 hours a day. And I was like a zombie. I just didn't feel anything.
Okay.
But they saved my life because they stopped the impulsiveness. They stopped the racing thoughts. They let me sleep. They let me recover from the breakdown that I had had. And then as I got more therapy and got more stable, my drugs became less intense. And that's what's happened over the years as I've learned and got more tools. So when I first got poorly, my only tool was meds. And then as it's gone on, I've learned more things. I've done trauma therapy. I've done all, you name it, I've been doing it. And you build a toolkit. So therefore your meds don't need to be quite as strong for me anyway.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. What were the meds that they put you on, just out of curiosity?
I was on quetiapine.
Okay.
But a really strong dose. So I was just, lived my life asleep.
Right. Oh, wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Do you, and again, sorry, you don't have to go into all this if you don't want to, but does it seem like that might be traced back to your traumatic upbringing, or were they able to say why?
It's definitely triggered. Yeah, it's definitely triggered by, or can be triggered by, stressful life events. And in the lead up to me being very poorly, I had 3 deaths that were quite close to me.
Okay. One
after the other. And then huge stress with the business that I was running, and a lot of stress going on in my marriage, and then an almighty fallout with my father. And that was the final piece.
Okay.
And then I was very, very poorly after that.
Okay. So how are you feeling these days, like just in general, in terms of bipolar?
I mean, good. It's something I have to manage. It's something it's just always running on the side in the background. My life is mostly stable. I have periods where I'm slightly busier and slightly more tired. But on the whole, I manage it quite well nowadays. But I have everything in place to manage it. My psychiatrist, my therapist, trauma therapist, a support group, meds if I need it. And I'm quite equipped to look after myself nowadays, whereas I really wasn't back then.
It sounds like you've worked really hard to establish that, what you said, toolkit of, all the different ways to deal with it.
And that takes time. You have to get to know what works for you and what doesn't. And that involves trying a whole heap of stuff that doesn't work.
Right. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of that. Getting back to the fertility journey. So where were you at this point? from where you were just saying.
So then we did the ovulation induction, and the first one got pregnant. We couldn't believe it. I thought, fertility treatment was easy.
Right. You're like, nailed it.
Yeah. 2 years on, I can laugh about that now. But right. I was like, wow, okay. But then I bled a week later. So we had a loss at 5 weeks. So then we did another ovulation induction that failed. Then the world went into lockdown because it was COVID.
Yeah.
And then we did another ovulation induction in May, which failed. Then I said, right, I want to do an IUI because it gives me an extra 5% chance. I'll take the extra 5%. Let's do it. So that's what we did. That failed. Then we switched doctors and clinics, and we uncovered that the doctor had been doing quite a lot of stuff not quite right. So we then did another IUI with this new clinic, new doctor, and got pregnant.
Okay.
And couldn't really believe it. Did the whole thing, where you're on the toilet and you're checking every time, checking for blood.
Yeah.
Grabbing your boobs every 5 seconds so they still hurt. They go an hour without hurting. You're like, oh my God, that's it. It's over.
100%. Yep.
All of that.
Yeah. So stressful.
So stressful. Stressful. And it carried on progressing well. We got to 12 weeks and everything was, we got to 12 weeks. We thought, this is it.
Okay. Was there a point, Emma, where you were able to kind of relax a little bit, at least? Like, 12 weeks is kind of the benchmark, first trimester. Did you feel okay, or were you still anxiety ridden?
At 12 weeks, I think I was there was a sense of relief, but then I just kept thinking in my head, because I wasn't bleeding, I kept thinking, I'm going to have a miscarriage. I'm going to have a miscarriage. That's all I kept telling myself. So every scan we went to, I kept thinking, and we were having scans every week because I also had a bit of bleeding between 6 and 8 weeks. So then we were in twice a week, and double the progesterone and all of that. So then I was just paranoid. We'd go to a scan and they'd say, oh, I'm really sorry, there's no heartbeat, So that didn't happen. So anyway, we went along at 12 and a half weeks, and I was due to have my NT scan the next day, but my anxiety was out of control. And I said, please, can you just give me a viability scan? Because I just need to know the baby's heart is beating. So she said, well, I can't do the NT scan today, but I can do the heartbeat scan, just to give you some reassurance. I was like, okay, cool. So sat down, she did that. And as she was doing it, because she was doing it on the same machine that an NT scan would be done on, she could see a lot, even though she was just going to check the heartbeat and send me on my way.
Okay.
And as she started scanning the heartbeat, I could hear the baby's heartbeat, and my baby was kicking her arms and legs about. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. Burst into tears again. It's just so relieved. And then her face changed, and she just said, I can't not tell you what I can see. And I looked over at my husband, and he had his head in his hands. And I thought, what's going on here? Like, I don't understand. I can hear the heartbeat. I can see my baby on the screen, like everything really clearly. What do you mean? And then she just started saying, that there's quite a lot wrong with your baby. And I'm thinking, wrong? What do you mean wrong? And then anyway, she went from not being able to see me to saying, I'm going to clear my diary. I want you back in an hour, and I'm going to do the full scan for you today because we need to address this today.
Oh my God. My heart just sunk thinking about how you must have felt when she said that. What was that feeling like?
Did you know that 1 in 8 couples struggle with fertility? That's over 7 million people in the United States alone. And the risk of miscarriage, it's more common than breast cancer or diabetes. The challenges of your fertility journey, we don't talk about them enough. We assume that when you're ready to have kids, it will be easy, but that just isn't the case for everyone. The journey can be expensive, mystifying, and full of disappointment and shame, but there is hope. You are not alone. On the new podcast, Baby or Bust, hosts Dr. Laura Shaheen, an OBGYN and reproductive endocrinologist, answers your questions, dispels the myths, and transforms disappointment into hope. Every episode of Baby or Bust features interviews with experts and real-life infertility survivors to explore answers to questions like, should I put my hips up afterwards? Should I be eating a pineapple to help with embryo implantation? Boxers versus briefs? When do you know it's the right time to have a baby? Will plastics and toxins kill my eggs? What really causes a miscarriage? Do hot tubs really kill sperm? And how do queer people have kids? Join Dr. Shaheen each week for practical approaches for your fertility journey. You are not alone, really. Find Baby or Bust on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Just like someone's just gone with your head, and you just kind of leave your body, and you're just like looking at yourself going through this situation.
Mm-hmm.
And just complete shock, really.
Yeah.
And we just walked like zombies.
Yeah.
We had an hour till she could see us. So
that's the longest hour ever.
But before I left the room, I said, I need to know what this might mean. And she said, well, we will do a proper scan and I will give you more information, but I'm not sure that this baby is going to make it. And I thought, oh my God, so we left anyway, went over and got a cup of tea. I can't even really remember that bit, to be honest. Came back, had the scan, and as she was going through the scan, there was a huge cystic hygroma on her head, which was almost as big as her head. So
what is that exactly?
A big fluid sac. On the head.
Mm-hmm.
And then she had fluid all over her neck, abdomen, and her chest. Mm. So she was swimming in fluid. The NT measurement at the back of her neck was 6.5, and it's supposed to be a maximum of 3.5. Mm. And and then there was something else going on with her stomach. And she said there was markers within the cystic hygroma that she thought would either be Turner syndrome or Pateau syndrome. Mm-hmm. So she said, but we need the genetics to match this up. So I'd already had the NIPT test 2 weeks before, and I was literally just waiting on the results. Mm-hmm. So we sat down with her and we said, well, what does this mean? Mm-hmm. She said, well, depending on what comes back with the genetic results, in some cases, parents choose not to continue the pregnancy. Mm. So I was looking at her and thinking, how can I have gone through 5 rounds of fertility treatment? Mm-hmm. And now you're telling me that I'm probably going to have to choose to end a pregnancy I've desperately fought to have. I couldn't reconcile it. Mm-hmm. And then she said, but in addition to that, your baby has a huge cystic hygroma. And I don't think that your baby's heart will be able to withstand the pressure from all the fluid. And I think that your baby's heart will give up by the time you're 28 weeks pregnant.
Oh, my gosh.
So I was like, right, okay. So anyway, we left with this information and we were waiting on the genetic results to come back. And then 2 days, the next day was my husband's birthday. I don't think I even wished him a happy birthday.
Yeah. How could you? You've got to be in shock. I mean, this is just the most devastating.
But I went to work. I went to work the next day because I didn't know what else to do.
Yeah.
I went and sat really important meetings with lawyers and banks.
Yeah.
On behalf of the company I was working for. Wow. And then in between the meetings, sat in the lobby, cried, put my makeup back on, went back into a meeting. So I didn't know what else to do.
Incredible. Yeah. Yeah, of course.
So definitely in shock. And then the next day, so 2 days later, the results came back in and it was like 99% Edwards syndrome. Mm-hmm. So then we went and spoke to genetic specialists and said, this is the results, teamed with the scan. In your opinion, what shall we do? So they told us the prognosis of children with Edwards syndrome, that they likely, not all of them make it to birth, and some are born and they die minutes or hours after birth or days. And 2% of babies that are born with Edwards make it past the age of 1 year old.
Okay.
Now, not all babies with Edwards make it to birth. So if you think those numbers get smaller and smaller each time, plus our baby had a cystic hygroma that because of the fluid, the heart would have given out. So by 28 weeks, they think.
Yeah.
So I was just faced with this situation where one way or another, our baby was going to die, and I could wait for my baby to die inside me for another 14 weeks, potentially, and then have a stillbirth. Mm-hmm. Or I could hope for a miracle that the baby would be born alive and wouldn't die during birth. And the baby would likely live hours or days, and then I'd have to watch my baby die, or might get to one and die in very young years, but spend most of their time highly medically dependent, spending most of their time in hospitals and not really even being able to come home and be at home. Or we could choose to end the pregnancy. So we chose to end the pregnancy. So we flew back to the UK at just under 14 weeks pregnant and said goodbye to our baby Willow. And yeah, it was just horrendous, honestly.
I'm so sorry that my heart goes out to anyone who's had to make that incredibly difficult decision. Tell me about the procedure. I mean, you don't have to get into specifics, but like when the day that you guys had to actually do it and saying goodbye and all that for you.
Yeah, I mean, for us, the day that my pregnancy was ended there was a calmness to it, because I think the distress is in is getting hit with the news, bad news after bad news after bad news. And then having to process that, and then having to, ring different places to organise ending your pregnancy yourself, and having to phone up and say, I want to have a termination, when you don't want to have a termination.
Right.
And then being faced with people saying really casually, oh, so you want an abortion? I'm like, no, I don't want to have, no. My baby is sick and you're not listening to me. So I had a whole day of conversations like that, which were incredibly distressing.
With who?
With receptionists, who were just so flippant in how they speak.
Right.
Because unfortunately, if you have a miscarriage, you go down the miscarriage route and you get looked after as a pregnancy loss person. If you are in the termination for medical reasons world, you get pushed down the abortion route, and people talk to you in that way, as in, oh, this is an unwanted pregnancy, we'll terminate it for you, that type of attitude.
Gotcha. Okay.
But when it's not that, it's very hard to hear, right, when you're trying to organise medical care for yourself. And,
understandable. Yeah.
So
yeah, I recently interviewed somebody, Emma, a couple, Aaron and MJ, and Aaron, they were talking about how they had to sadly terminate for medical reasons as well. And they, they went to an abortion clinic, and there were protesters outside, and they were like, you're, harassing this poor woman, MJ. Yeah. And she was like, this is the worst day of my life, and you're telling me I'm a terrible person. Yeah. Like, and he went up and he went off on it's on YouTube, actually. He went off on these protesters and said, you have no idea what we've been through, and how dare you. And it was just, it just made me, it's so hard.
Well, for us, that was sort of similar, because I wanted to be asleep. So if you want to be awake, I would have been looked after in a hospital, but I wanted to be asleep. So therefore you then get pushed down the abortion clinic route. And then you then get into these waters of people assuming why and all of this. So anyway, in the end, I said to Gareth, I can't go into or past protesters. I can't, screaming at me, how dare you kill your, but I just cannot. This is hard enough as it is. So we actually paid privately and went to, luckily, COVID happened and cancelled our wedding. So we got a big refund that literally came 2 weeks before. So we used some of that money to pay for us to fly to London and go to a private hospital where we could be looked after how we wanted to be, which was as grieving parents. So we did that, and Gareth was able to be with me for the whole time. They looked after our baby's remains and sent them to the funeral directors, and that went to the crematorium, and then we got our ashes back, and it was just, we were looked after as kindly and as compassionately as you could in that situation.
Right. Yeah, that's good.
And then, the day was quite calm. We walked around the park close to the hospital, watched the squirrels, didn't really know what to say to each other. Went to the hospital, and then she came and inserted the first part of the procedure. and told me that, you know, I might start cramping and bleeding. It's basically to bring on labour.
Mm-hmm.
And they made sure that I was pain-free, which I was grateful for.
Yeah.
And then they took me down. And as I went down, obviously Gareth's not allowed to be with me in the anaesthetist room. And then that's when I just lost it. I completely lost it.
Yeah.
I was howling. I was so upset.
So sorry.
I can't even explain how distressed I felt. And the nurse was amazing. And she held my hand and she said, "You're a good mum." She said, "And you're doing the best thing for your family and your baby. And I want you to know you're the best mum."
Oh.
And that's the last words that I heard before I got put to sleep.
Yeah. I'm glad she said that to you. And you are. It's true.
So I'll never forget her words and her kindness, because I definitely didn't feel like a good mum.
Right. Of course. Yeah. I do want to talk about that a little bit more, but we should also talk about the support group that you're running and the Instagram account, which is TFMR Mamas. Tell me about that, and then we'll get back to your story a little bit more. But why did you think it was so important to start this group? It's, you know, for mamas with TFMR angel babies, which is a wonderful resource.
Thank you. What I do in my job is I mentor people in their mental health, and I mentor women in trauma recovery, specifically around sexual trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And I was looking for that type of environment, but for TFMR, and I just couldn't find exactly what I was looking for. And then what happened was, because I was sharing the last 2 rounds of fertility treatment, so the failed IUI and the IUI that worked, I was sharing it on my social media real time. So, of course, as we got this diagnosis, that was being shared real time too. And then what happened was, as I got an influx of people who had just been through it, some people who'd been through it like 10 years ago, and some people who were just receiving diagnoses. And I ended up spending about 6 to 8 hours a day just replying to people who were like, "Oh my God, I'm just looking for anyone that understands how I feel.
Mm-hmm.
I'm having the most awful time. I've just been told there's something wrong with my baby, blah, 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 blah." So I was grieving. I was, I just lost my baby. And I was thinking, I can't do this in this way, because this is bigger than me.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm struggling. So I gave it a month or 2 months or something. So it was in the January. So it's about 2.5 months later. And then I set up the Instagram page, TFMR Mamas. And I said to everyone on my page, anybody that's in this space, go over there, because this is where you can get support. So I just started posting, and I was posting my thoughts, my quotes, just what was coming up in my head every single day. And it just grew and grew, and it's grown into something I never imagined it would be. I'm sad that it has to exist.
Right.
And I'm grateful, so grateful for the community that I'm now connected with.
Mm-hmm.
And I run free support groups. I run weekly mentored support groups, because a lot of the tools that I use in my other groups are transferable into this space, because it's grief work and it's trauma work.
Mm-hmm.
And that is everything that's going on when you have a TFMR. So I just knew that the daily tools that I was using and teaching could really help parents in this space as well. So that's what I did. And here we are.
Mm-hmm.
And TFMR Mamas is, busy. It takes up a lot of my time now.
Right.
And I love doing it. To be honest, after losing Willow, I had very little interest in doing anything that didn't have some purpose or meaning.
Sure.
Nothing matters. I was like, none of this matters. It's all rubbish. It's all nonsense.
Yeah, right. Understandable. Well, I'm so glad that you've got this group, and everyone, please check out TFMR Mamas on Instagram. Tell me how you and Gareth have honored Willow since your loss.
All different things, really. There's loads of little things. I've got lots of little things. I've got her ashes sitting just up there.
Mm-hmm.
My friends have sent me little things, which is lovely. Yeah, I don't know. So someone's planted trees in her memory in
that's really cool.
in a forest, which is amazing. And I think TFMR Mamas really is probably the biggest thing in her memory.
Right.
Because I say, unless, without her existing, it wouldn't exist. So
right. Exactly.
I'd probably say TFMR Mamas is the biggest thing that's been done in her name. Really.
Absolutely. And how was the immediate, grief obviously is not a straight line, it's different, looks different for everyone. How did that look for you guys, and how are you doing now?
Yeah, I mean, grief is messy. Grief is different on everyone. Me and my husband grieve very differently. I think the key to it is not trying to make someone grieve how you grieve, and not expecting someone to grieve how you grieve. And however that other person, it really is. And however that person grieves is no reflection on if they care or not either. It's just everyone's got to do what they've got to do. And you've got to let people grieve. You've got to let people be sad. People aren't very good at that. People are terrible at letting people be sad.
Yeah, that's such a good point. It's always like, be strong, suck it up. You don't need to, move on, all that stuff. I mean, what are some things for someone who might be listening that's going through the grief process after a loss, be it, termination for medical reasons or otherwise? What are some tools that you can share in terms of just kind of getting by like the day to day? Because, as you said, there's some days where you probably just didn't even want to get out of bed, right?
No, and I didn't. I think the idea of when will I go back to normal, or when will I feel like my old self, I think that whole thing probably has to just be thrown in the bin. And I think what's more helpful is to understand that something massive has happened to you, and you're not just grieving a one-time event. You're grieving how your life was going to look, how your life looks right now, everything you imagined it to be that it's not going to be. It's impossible to remain the same person, and that's okay. It's okay that you change. It's okay that something like this changes you as a person. And, the people around us have just got to get to know the new version, and you'll soon find out who stays and who doesn't. And that's another loss, right? Because sometimes those relationships get lost along the way. But that doesn't mean that you should quieten down your truth to make other people comfortable. Grieve how you need to grieve. The biggest bit of advice I could give for a couple is, if you are grieving differently, please don't try and attribute a meaning to that. So please don't think, oh, well, they don't seem as sad as I do, so they don't care as much. That is so not the case. We might be in a coupleship, but that doesn't mean we're the same people. We're completely different people, and you've just got to allow that other person to be and hold that space for them, whatever that is, and respect how they grieve and let them do it without trying to change them, fix them, stop them, hurry them up, slow them down, or any of the above.
So good. So true. So how are you doing, like, in general? Like, how's your day to day these days?
I mean, I don't have as many griefy days, but I still have griefy days. And at the beginning, grief is like you're in this storm and you can't get out of the sea. And then as it goes on, you get out of the sea and you step on the shore every once in a while. And then sometimes you get dragged back in the storm again, and you get spat back out on the shore again, and the ebb and flow. Completely. And different things will come up and trigger you. And I think the biggest thing you can give yourself is grace, and just say, how I am right now is completely understandable given everything that's gone on. So just be super, super kind to you, and don't expect yourself to be who you were before, and be able to stand up and get running and be cool.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you to Emma. And as promised, I'm going to read verbatim the update that she sent me since we talked. So this is what she wrote to me earlier this week. She said, we were preparing for our frozen embryo transfer, which was due to happen at the end of March, first week of April, and we got a spontaneous positive pregnancy test. It turns out that we conceived on the very next ovulation after egg retrieval from our last round of IVF. I'm currently 13 weeks pregnant, and we have had low risk NIPT and a low risk NT scan, and the baby is showing to be healthy so far. Hoping that we get to bring home our first living child at the end of 2022. Weirdly, I don't think we would have got pregnant had we not just done the last round of IVF. It was our most successful round so far, and the only round where we got blastocysts, of which one was normal. It's also the round where we both did a 12-week prep, reduced sperm DNA frag, and I did 45 days of HGH shots as part of my protocol. It's all bonkers, and we are very thankful for this unexpected chance. So that's what Emma wrote. I'm so thrilled for her. Definitely check her out, her Instagram, TFMR Mamas. And I'm just amazed at, what can happen on all of these wild and devastating and also wonderful journeys. So thank you guys so much for always sharing and for always listening. Thanks again, and congrats to Emma, and I will talk to you guys next time.